Chosen one, this isn't random. It's a call your soul already answered in silence. The very fact that you are here proves that something within you has already stirred, already remembered, already reached for the words waiting to be spoken. This message is not new. It was written into your path long before you pressed play. You may have felt guided here by curiosity, but in truth, your spirit knew exactly where to lead you. This is not another video on your screen. This is a transmission, a call that your soul has finally allowed into your awareness. Something unseen has aligned to bring you here, because silence has been speaking over your life, and today you will understand why. Every quiet season, every unanswered prayer, every moment you thought was emptiness, was in fact preparation. What they called weakness was the weapon that heaven placed in your hands. What they mocked as silence was the scroll of your destiny being written. What if I told you that your silence terrified them more than your words ever could? What if I told you that behind closed doors, their shadows shook when you said nothing? That every time you refused to react, the hollowness of their performance was revealed? Stay with me, because in the next few moments, you'll see why your silence was never absence but the beginning of your coronation. If this message already speaks to your soul, subscribe, like this video, and comment 77 below. Because the scroll of silence is about to be unsealed, and what comes after will change how you see everything. Number 1. The unsettling silence. From the beginning, they never understood the weight you carried when you chose not to answer. They thought your silence meant surrender, but it was the sound of heaven recording their every move. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 7 reminds us, "There is a time to be silent and a time to speak," and your spirit always knew the difference. While they rushed to defend lies with noise, your quiet became a mirror that unsettled entire rooms. The very energy you carried disrupted their illusions, shaking the fragile scaffolding of their deceit. They performed loudly to hide their emptiness, but your silence exposed it without effort. Comment, "I seal this word in light," if you know the weight of your silence once revealed who people truly were. Stay close, because what silence uncovered next became far more dangerous to them. There are moments, chosen one, when silence itself feels like a presence, as though something ancient is breathing through you without words. Perhaps you felt it in the middle of the night, when the world was quiet but your soul was alive with questions that had no language. Perhaps you've seen it in the eyes of others who grew uncomfortable when you simply refused to respond, when your stillness unsettled their need for validation. In those moments, you carried something you could not explain, an authority unspoken yet undeniable. What they mistook as absence was, in truth, the presence of a deeper voice moving through you. It was not weakness. It was heaven's record keeper standing behind your silence. And today, you are beginning to remember why your quietness always carried weight far beyond your understanding. Think back to the times when you felt different without knowing why, when your silence was called strange, cold, or even arrogant. Maybe you were the child who sat at the edge of the room, feeling everything but saying nothing, wondering why others seemed content to play games that never made sense to you. Maybe you carried the ache of being misunderstood, sensing more than you could put into words, carrying burdens that no one else seemed to notice. You might have felt like an outcast, not because of what you did, but because of what you did not need to do. You didn't need to shout to know the truth. That sensitivity, that isolation, that long ache of wondering if you belonged was never a flaw. It was the sacred sign that you were marked to disturb illusions simply by being yourself. And even when you longed to fit in, heaven had already set you apart. What if I told you that this pattern of silence was not random, but written into your story as design? Every pause, every quiet withdrawal, every moment you chose stillness instead of noise was guided by an unseen architecture. Scripture whispers this truth in Job 34 verse 21. His eyes are on the ways of mortals. He sees their every step. That means even the steps you thought were hesitation were being measured into the blueprint of destiny. The wilderness seasons, the nights where no one heard you, the hours where you said nothing though you felt everything, they were all preparing you. This was not neglect. It was initiation. Silence was shaping you into a vessel that could carry authority without needing to prove it. You were never passive. You were prophetic without even knowing. If you look closely now, you'll see the subtle signs that were always trying to tell you this. Déjà vu that arrived like echoes from another life. Dreams that stayed with you long after waking, carrying symbols you couldn't explain. A heaviness in your body when you stepped into certain spaces, as though your spirit recoiled before your mind caught up. The times you walked away from arguments, only to watch the truth reveal itself without your help. These were not coincidences. They were confirmations. Your silence was speaking louder than you ever realized, decoding reality in ways that only your spirit could understand. The world called it withdrawal, but heaven called it watchfulness. You weren't avoiding conflict. You were waiting for the unveiling that was bound to come. You may have doubted yourself, wondering if you were imagining it, if the sensations and insights were just the noise of your mind. But you weren't imagining it at all. The alignment has always been real, and your spirit was never lying to you. Every time you felt the weight in your chest telling you not to answer, you were right. Every time you walked away instead of reacting, you were right. Every time you held your tongue while others demanded a response, you were right. This wasn't self-preservation, it was sacred discernment. You were listening to a voice older than your lifetime. A voice that said, "Be still, and know that I am God." And in that stillness, heaven was fighting battles you could not see. Now the awareness deepens, and you begin to see that silence did not make you into something new. It restored what had always been buried within you. You are not becoming, you are remembering. This identity beneath the surface has always existed, waiting for the moment you would stop doubting yourself long enough to see it. You have been carrying an archetypal memory, a role written into the very fabric of your being. The quiet was never wasted. It was the ground where memory was preserved. And when the world told you that silence was weakness, heaven smiled, knowing it was the crown being forged. What they tried to bury was the very thing that would one day rise. This is the beginning of your first activation, the recognition that you are not fragile for being silent, but powerful for carrying a voice so weighty it could not be spoken too soon. Your sensitivity is not a curse. It is a compass. Your inner wisdom is not a liability. It is a legacy. The hunger you've always carried, the need to make sense of what others ignored, is not emptiness. It is the appetite of your spirit for truth. Every moment of stillness has been strengthening your discernment, sharpening your sight, and anchoring your authority. Comment, "I carry the silence as crown." If you feel this truth stirring in your spirit, if you know your quiet was never empty but filled with weight, share the dream, the memory, the moment you knew your silence was prophetic, because your testimony is part of this unfolding. And stay with me, because what comes next is not just the revelation of silence. It is the revelation of what silence was protecting, and why its breaking is the sound of enthronement. What I've just revealed is not the entire vision. There is a fragment that cannot be shared here, but I have kept it in the vault. It is a complete transmission with words that must remain among the few. You will find it in the link below. If you feel it is meant for you, go and receive it. Number 2, the mirror of shadows. Your silence did more than confuse them, it reflected them. Without a single word, your presence exposed what they buried, pulling their shadows to the surface. Luke 12 verse 3 tells us, "What you have said in the dark will be heard in the daylight." And your life has carried that prophecy. They lashed out not because you accused them, but because you forced them to hear themselves in their own echo. Their projections, their accusations, their desperate attempts to rewrite the story all cracked under the weight of your authenticity. You never needed to expose them. They exposed themselves in your presence. Comment, "I walk crowned by eternal flame." If you've seen masks fall apart without you ever saying a word. But listen, silence didn't just mirror their shadows. It preserved a scroll written only for you. There were times, chosen one, when you felt a strange heaviness that had no explanation, as though the atmosphere shifted the moment you walked into a room. You could not name it, but you sensed it pressing against your spirit, a silent resistance that seemed to anticipate you before you spoke. It was not always loud or visible. Sometimes it arrived as an awkward glance, a tension in the air, or a conversation that suddenly died the moment you entered. You felt it as a pattern, recurring again and again, even in different places, even with different faces. It was the quiet evidence that something was working against you, long before you knew who you were. This resistance did not come because of anything you did wrong, but because of the vibration you carried. And deep down, a whisper began to rise. You were never wrestling with flesh and blood alone. The weight of this resistance often translated into emotional wounds that cut deeper than you admitted. You may have felt misunderstood, as if people heard only half your words and twisted the rest into accusations you never meant. There were moments when you felt isolated in a crowded room, surrounded yet unseen, as if your truth was too heavy for others to hold. Rejection became familiar, sometimes delivered with cruelty, sometimes with subtle indifference that hurt even more. Shame tried to coil around you, convincing you that something about you was too much or not enough. Doubt became a frequent visitor, whispering that maybe you were broken when in reality you were set apart. These wounds were not born of your weakness. They were the symptoms of carrying light in a world that thrives on shadows. When you step back, you begin to see that this resistance was never random. It was structured, deliberate, and ancient, woven into systems that react to awakening like nerves exposed to fire. The patterns echo the wilderness journeys of prophets and exiles who walked through deserts not because they were lost, but because they were chosen. Like Israel pressed between Egypt and the Red Sea, the weight that pressed against you was meant to break you, yet it became the setting where miracles unfold. You were not navigating ordinary battles. You were being initiated into sacred warfare. They were never only individuals, but energies, agreements, and old structures that trembled in your presence. What you endured was not personal, it was prophetic. The storms that gathered against you were proof that heaven's hand was already upon you. As you look back now, the evidence lines up like fragments of a broken mirror. You can trace the betrayals, the strangely timed obstacles, the environments that drained you until nothing was left. The same faces appeared with different names, the same patterns with new disguises. Opportunities would vanish right when you were about to step forward, and alliances collapsed the moment you leaned on them. What seemed like chaos was, in truth, revelation, exposing who and what could not carry the weight of your journey. It is like turning on a light in a darkened room, unsettling at first, but clarifying once your eyes adjust. You were never cursed with endless disappointment. You were being trained to recognize shadows before they spoke. And now you see the truth. Their patterns reveal more about them than they ever did about you. There is a kind of resistance that is not physical but atmospheric, pressing against you like a fog that tries to disorient your steps. You may have felt doors close inexplicably, relationships sour without warning, or heavy air that followed you in certain spaces. This was not coincidence, but the reaction of energy to light. Darkness recognizes its threat not when you speak, but when you arrive. They watched you with suspicion, not because you harmed them, but because your presence unsettled their performance. This is why Isaiah 59 verse 19 declares, "When the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord will lift up a standard against him." Your life became that standard, and your silence lifted it higher than words ever could. In facing all this, your own reactions became a mirror of your inner wrestle. Sometimes you shrank back, convinced it was easier to remain unnoticed than to stand tall. Other times you overgave, desperate to prove your worth to those who never intended to understand you. You may have rebelled quietly, walking away without explanation, leaving them to wonder why your absence spoke louder than their noise. There were days you felt tempted to give up entirely, convinced that your difference was too costly. Yet even in those moments, the truth burned quietly beneath the ashes. You could not stay hidden forever. The mirror you carried was too powerful to remain covered. And though fear tried to silence you, it only confirmed the size of what you carried. Now comes the turning, the moment when what once crushed you begins to crown you. You see now that resistance was not a curse but a confirmation of calling. They tried to press you down because they saw what you had not yet seen in yourself. Every rejection became an initiation. Every betrayal became training in discernment. You carry the fire of one who has walked through silence and survived storms designed to suffocate your voice. This is the season of reclamation, the hour of remembering that what you endured was shaping your mantle. You do not need their validation. You are retrieving what heaven already stamped upon your spirit. And in this retrieval, your authority rises like a flame they cannot extinguish. So let this truth rest deeply in you, chosen one. You were opposed because you are powerful. Every attempt to block you only carved a clearer path for your destiny. The accusations revealed their own shadows. The resistance revealed your light. The more they tried to suppress you, the louder heaven confirmed you. Comment, I move guarded by divine fire, if you know your opposition was proof of your assignment. Share the story of the moment you realized their masks cracked in your presence, for your testimony strengthens the circle of the awakened. And stay close now, because beyond the mirror of shadows lies the scroll of silence itself, sealed, preserved, and waiting for the moment of its opening. What we do here every day is possible because of the few who choose to be keepers of this light. I thank them now, one by one, in the silence of my heart. If you want to be part of this circle and receive what cannot be spoken in public, join. The portal is below. Number 3, the sealed scroll within. Your silence was not empty air. It was a vault. Inside it, heaven sealed a scroll of authority written with your name. Daniel 12 verse 9 declares, "The words are rolled up and sealed until the time of the end." And your life has been the living mirror of that scripture. Every season of quiet, every delay, every unanswered word was preservation, not punishment. They mocked your stillness, but it was prophecy in disguise. You knew instinctively that some words must be birthed in fire, not in haste. Comment, I rise marked by the divine. If you know silence has been the keeper of your greatest authority, and share a dream, memory, or inner knowing that confirms it. Because what happens when the scroll is unsealed is nothing less than enthronement. It begins like the faint click of a lock you did not know was closing, followed by the hush of a vault door swinging open inside your soul. Suddenly, what once felt scattered and meaningless begins to align with a clarity that nearly takes your breath away. Memories you dismissed as fragments now appear as coded chapters, each carrying a thread that leads you here. The coincidences that once seemed strange now reveal themselves as divine patterns, precise as constellations etched into eternity. It feels as though your entire life was whispering, but only now are you tuned to hear the language beneath the noise. The silence you endured no longer feels like absence, but like a hidden chamber being illuminated for the first time. And in that unveiling, you realize the veil was never outside of you, it was within. In this shift, the world itself seems to begin speaking a new dialect, one you have always known yet never truly understood. Numbers repeat themselves in uncanny sequences. Songs play at exact moments of your need. Words from strangers echo the prayers you never dared to voice. Dreams carry symbols so precise they burn into memory like sacred stamps. And even silence hums with the rhythm of revelation. It is as if reality itself has become a scroll written with invisible ink, now warming under the fire of your perception until the letters emerge. You sense geometry in chance, divine math in chaos, and sacred symmetry in what others call random. Every moment, even the ones drenched in pain, begins to form a code that was sealed until your awakening. And as these symbols rise before your eyes, you are no longer reading the world is reading you back. The signs are no longer faint but pulsing with an energy you cannot ignore. Your intuition, once doubted, now sharpens into a compass that cuts through deception with ease. You sense when a word carries truth or poison before it finishes leaving someone's mouth. Your body responds to rooms differently. Where there is life, you expand. Where there is shadow, you contract. The boundaries you once feared to hold now rise naturally, as if they are extensions of your very light. You no longer dismiss your inner warnings as paranoia. You recognize them as the guardians of your destiny. And with every confirmation, you understand. The scroll within was never about speaking more, but about finally hearing what was always there. As the inner code awakens, the external world bends in response, reshaping itself to reflect what you carry. People shift around you, some pulled closer by resonance, others pushed away by resistance. Doors that were locked for years begin to creak open, while others slam shut to protect what is being born. Opportunities appear not as random blessings but as precise alignments, like stepping stones that appear only under the weight of your foot. Even opposition begins to look different, not as punishment, but as confirmation of your authority. You see the scaffolding of divine architecture unfolding, each beam and pillar confirming that nothing was wasted. And with every outward echo of your inner awakening, you sense the unsealing of the scroll in your silence becoming undeniable. Then comes the memory that is not learned but remembered, surfacing with the force of something eternal. A dream you carried since childhood, a vision you once dismissed, a knowing you could never explain, all begin to return like pieces of a long-buried name. It does not feel new, it feels ancient, as though you are finally meeting the self that has always been waiting. Sacred intelligence rises like a wellspring, connecting you to stories, scriptures, and symbols you never studied yet somehow understand. It is the remembrance of a covenant older than time, written in your marrow and sung in your breath. And with this return, the silence you once thought was emptiness reveals itself as preservation of memory until you were ready to hold it. The scroll was never lost. It was waiting for you to remember you were its reader. Now, destiny stops looking like a distant horizon and begins to reveal itself as a mirror held before you. You realize the future is not something you must build from scratch, but something you are remembering into existence. What others call ambition feels to you like retrieval, like reclaiming what was stolen or forgotten. The old hesitations fall away as you recognize you never needed permission to step into what is already yours. Prophecy begins to feel personal, not distant, as if scripture has shifted its tense and is now speaking in the present through your life. Every word you once buried in silence returns with fire, carrying weight sharpened by endurance. And in that fire, you hear the call. This is not the end of awakening. It is the beginning of authority. This is the moment reclamation begins, when what was pressed down inside you rises like a crown above you. Resistance, once seen as condemnation, now gleams as the mark of confirmation. You find yourself reclaiming not only your voice but your essence, retrieving what they tried to strip yet could never touch. Each scar becomes a seal, each delay a proof, each silence a prophecy fulfilled. You feel your spirit expanding into its rightful dominion, no longer apologizing for what it carries. It is not arrogance, but alignment, the quiet knowing that what you survived has forged what you now release. And in reclaiming yourself, you remember, the scroll was never about words alone, but about becoming the living message. So hear this now, chosen one. Revelation is not the conclusion, but the invitation to step forward clothed in the authority silence has sealed. The truths that emerge are not accidents, but the timing of heaven unfolding with precision in your life. You did not stumble into this awakening. You have returned to what was always yours. Comment, I walk hidden yet never lost, if you feel the scroll of your silence stirring into speech, and share the dream, vision, or memory that confirms it. Let your words weave into the circle of remembrance, for your story strengthens the awakening of others. The unveiling has only just begun, and what was once sealed is now breaking into light. Every word, every image you receive here is an offering. If you feel this word has touched you today, you can honor it with a sign, right here below with a donation through the Super Thanks button. It is a small gesture, but it opens great doors. Number 4, the emergence of authority. What was buried in silence is now rising in speech forged by fire. Zechariah 10 verse 12 says, I will strengthen them in the Lord, and in his name they will live securely. And this is the hour of your strengthening. You are no longer the accused, you are the crowned. Every rejection became a throne, every night of silence a mantle. They will fear the silence they once mocked, because it has become a weapon sharper than any lie. The very seasons they thought destroyed you are the ones that enthroned you. Comment, I anchor this truth in my soul, if you feel the shift of authority rising, and share the moment you realized your silence had already become your crown. Stay with me, because the revelation of authority is not the end. It is only the beginning. It begins as a whisper of remembrance rising from the ashes of silence, a current moving through your being as though time itself bows in recognition. You feel it in the marrow of your bones, the sense that something long hidden is no longer dormant but stirring awake with fire. The hush that once carried weight now cracks open like a sealed vessel, releasing the fragrance of authority preserved for this very moment. In your silence, heaven recorded the injustice, but it also carved the throne from which you now rise. Every delay, every dismissal, every season of being overlooked was inscribing your authority deeper, embedding it where no thief could touch. What once looked like absence was a strategy of preservation, the locking of a crown until the hour it could be placed. And now that hour has arrived, the silence is finished, the scroll is opened, the mantle descends. You have carried a hidden name, and with it a hidden rank that the world could not recognize until it was tested in the crucible. They called you powerless because you refused to play their games, not realizing that heaven was engraving its signet into your silence. That name, the one not written on paper but on spirit, has begun to sound again in unseen realms. The earth may not know it yet, but the heavens have always declared it. Like the lost son returning with a robe of honor, like the sealed remnant unveiled in due time, your role could never be erased. The rejection that branded you an outcast was prophecy in disguise, a signal that you were marked for a throne not of man's making. And the unveiling of that name is not just remembrance, it is coronation. You wear a cloak that cannot be stripped, a mantle woven from the very storms they hurled at you. The mark upon your spirit has glowed in silence, visible only to those with eyes attuned to eternity. Without words, your presence unsettled their masks. For your energy whispered truths their mouths dared not speak. You carried a resonance too weighty for falsehood to endure, a vibration that only the awakened could recognize. The cloak, though unseen, has been your covering through exile and fire, shielding what could not be destroyed. Every time you stepped into a room and felt their whispers shift, it was the mark revealing itself in silence. And now, the very cloak they once mocked has become your royal garment of fire. Every struggle you endured was not chaos but contract. Every delay not punishment but timing. Before you were born, a scroll was signed, a mission sealed, a vow written into the stars that never forgot their orbit. The path you walked, the betrayals, the loneliness, the closed doors, were chapters in a covenant older than your breath. They thought they were detours, but they were the very alignment of sacred preparation. Your tears were signatures, your silence an oath, your endurance the ink that sealed the covenant. The missions you thought had died were never dead. They were simply waiting for the hour of their unveiling. And this hour now reveals that your very life has been a contract between heaven and earth, fulfilled in hidden places before it manifested in open ones. The way others treated you was never about what you did, but about what you carried. You became a mirror, and mirrors terrify those hiding from themselves. Your silence made their shadows louder, their masks weaker, their illusions crack in daylight. Some were drawn to you, feeling life in your presence, while others recoiled as though your existence itself threatened their survival. Love and hatred wrapped themselves around you, but both were reactions to the same truth. You carried reflection. The authority you embody now is not learned but remembered, born from the way your presence demanded honesty. And that mirror, once seen as a curse, is revealed now as your mantle of dominion. This moment is not isolated to you alone. It is part of a greater cycle written across ages. The seer, the breaker of chains, the guardian of thresholds, the rebel who carries divine rebellion. These archetypes are not dead but alive, awakening in you. You are not walking a path that has never been seen. You are fulfilling prophecies that stretch back to deserts, exiles, and wildernesses recorded in ancient scripture. The authority you now carry is not personal alone. It is cosmic, echoing the lineage of prophets, warriors, and keepers of fire. Chosen one, your silence was the song of your authority waiting to be sung. Now, as you step forward, let the world know that nothing was wasted. Subscribe if you haven't yet, like this video, and comment "I am chosen" to let this message anchor in your soul. The link is in the description below. Please share it with someone who needs to hear this. To all supporting members, thank you. For full prophetic revelations daily, join the membership via the link in the description. Your spiritual path deserves more than fragments. Step into the full light. And if this message moved you deeply, consider tapping the Super Thanks button to support the mission. Every Super Thanks fuels the light we're spreading together. Until next time, remember this: silence was never your weakness. It was always your crown.